Hi there. It's September the 2nd, and today we begin a new book in Scripture, and we are looking at the Megillat Kohelet in Hebrew, which means the scroll of Ecclesiastes, we call him. Ecclesiastes is part of the third section of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Ketuvim, the Scriptures, the written things. There's the Torah, the Nevi'im is the prophets, and the Ketuvim is the Scriptures, the writings. And so Kohelet comes in the writings. Kohelet actually comes from the word kahal, that means a gathering or a drawing together. The Kahal Israel is the assembly of Israel. So the Kohelet is the one who addresses the assembly. He's the one who speaks to the assembly. So Kohelet sort of means a preacher, one who's speaking to the gathered people. And the book is actually read traditionally in Hebrew tradition during the Feast of Sukkot, during the Feast of Tabernacles, and particularly by some traditions of Judaism read on the last day of the feast, to Shemini Atzeret, the feast that John mentions when Jesus stood up and said, "If anyone's thirsty, let him come to me." In other traditions, in the Ashkenazi tradition and Western tradition, it's read in the Sabbath during Sukkot or on the last day if there's no Sabbath. So it's connected with that feast, Feast of Tabernacles. Now, it deals a lot, this book, with the meaning of life and also with the transience of life. The book is written by a king. A king. It's traditionally linked with Solomon, though many scholars say it could be just a king because a son of David might mean a descendant of David. But it is someone who's had experience of having great wealth and great power, and yet sees that in those things there isn't really the essential meaning of life, the essential purpose of life. And actually the theme of Ecclesiastes that comes out very much is that without God, without finding your anchor in God, without the fear of God, without the awe of God, everything is just so futile, so transient. A word that occurs a lot in these first three chapters, or it's considered in these chapters, is the word havel or hevel. And hevel in Hebrew, even the sound of it, hevel, it's to do with a breath. It's to do with ephemeral, it's transient, it's passing. And this is what the Kohelet, this is what the preacher says, that life is transient, that life is so quick. And then he picks up the theme here by saying, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're foolish or wise, everything goes so quickly and you can't hold on to it. He says in the second chapter that having all this wealth, having all this ability to establish vineyards and to establish gardens and to make pools of water and to have wonderful architectural abilities still doesn't fill that ache inside. And he's talking about really the ache inside that things will not fill. And then in chapter 3, he homes in on something. The preacher says in verse 11 of chapter 3, you have set, some translations have eternity in the heart of man, but the word in the Hebrew is the word olam. And that means something unlimited, that there is something in the heart of man that has a sense that there is more than just himself, that there's something beyond himself. And Kohelet and the Ecclesiastes, the preacher, says that in his heart, man senses that there's something more than just this brief futility. And in fact, in verse 14 of Ecclesiastes 3, it says that God purposes to do things, that God will achieve things. It says he's made everything beautiful in its time. And of course, at the beginning of chapter 3, there's that amazing song, that amazing poem that says that there is a time and a purpose to everything under heaven, that there is purpose, there is time, but actually God is the one who sets that purpose in place. Without God, there is no meaning. Without God, everything is, as the preacher says, havel, everything is havel havelim, the most transient of transient things. And yet, with God, there is purpose and meaning because he has set eternity. He has set unlimited possibility within our heart. It's amazing to think that so far back there was such wisdom. There was such insight, and the book of Ecclesiastes is still one today that people consult and people go back to because it has such a depth of wisdom to point us to our own sense of transience, of the brevity of our lives, and yet the eternity, the fullness, the unlimited possibilities that there is if we go with God. Have a very good September the 2nd.